regularly scheduled. We changed our schedule to the second Monday of the month. At our meeting last month, the first item on our agenda is the minutes of the March 5th meeting. Do I have a motion? Any comments or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 I know Penny thinks you don't need a motion, but we'll do a motion. Comments from the public. I think we said we would take email comments. Well, I have received none that I'm aware of. If I receive any, I'll read them. We tried this last week with the Selectmen meeting and received none.
Kevin, I have a quick question for you while you're looking that up.
Yep.
Were you really up at 4 a.m.?
I'm always up at 4 a.m.
Typing away.
I have a usual sleep cycle, Neil.
Wow.
I wake up between 3 and 4. But
What's the sleep part?
what's the sleep part? Anyway, so the next item is the New Canaan Public School solar projects and the cogen projects. And Penny, do you want to give a brief update on what the plan is for the east, west, and south east?
Sure. I mean, Joanne is on, and she has all the details, so I'll turn it over to her. But she's got a great plan that's been approved by the Board of Ed for the solar projects at I guess east, west, Saks. And what, Joanne, why don't you, and Dan Clark is on as well. And
I'm sorry, I saw Dan. I didn't see Joanne.
So Joanne is here too. So
I just jumped on too, Penny. Hi, this is Brian.
And Brian is on. And
Yep.
the Board of Ed approved them last Monday night, and we think they'll save the district a lot of money and are a good way to move forward. We ended up doing PPAs because that was the most economically beneficial. But Joanne and Brian, or Dan, why don't one of you take it over there?
Brian?
Sure. I'll get started and then we can get into the details. So as you know, we went through a bidding process last year with South. We identified, we had 6 bidders come in, interviewed 3 of them, went with Davis Hill, who was the lowest, and excellent company, great financials, all those great things. Wound up going with a PPA with them that was carefully discussed and negotiated and worked through. And the project itself, as everyone knows, was very, very successful. We, we got that up and running. Day like this, we don't really do very well, of course, with the wind and the, without the sunshine, but on a sunny day that it hums along. You've seen the, well, actually, when you walk into South, right up on the screen is a monitor that shows exactly what the power is being generated, all that stuff. Works great with the kids. So anyway, so that was very successful. We have the Z-Rex in place, other things that we need. So we went with, spoke with Davis Hill, talked to them about using that same PPA and reviewing Saks, East and West. Each of the locations is a little different. South's literally faces south, which is, of course, the best way for solar panels to capture the energy that they want. So the prices are a little different in each of the other buildings based on a couple of different factors. But bottom line is they are, and I'll, Joe and Dan can go get more specific, but bottom line is over $1.5 million over the 20 years with these would be saved, that we could get moving on it quickly. We certainly have some concern around market disruption, things like that, given what's going on in the world and in the world market. Davis Hill is telling us that they'll be able to source this quickly for us. Also the market, the interest rates are preferable for something like this at this point. So the pricing and the money, the financing that we'll look at is the ceiling with Davis Hill. And if things even improve, they'll actually take them down a little bit. We've negotiated with them a couple of rounds of negotiation with them to get to where we are. Brought it before the resources committee of the board, shared it with them, brought it before the board, public session, then brought it again before the board for approval. So we bring it to you now to get to speed on it. There's certainly value to using the same contractor and jumping on the same agreements and PPA. Again, that was the PPA itself was very carefully crafted back and forth between the Board of Ed, Shipman and Goodwin, Davis Hill. And I'm even hearing now that they're using it as a model with all of their clients. But that, that work and being able to build off that seems to make really good sense for us going forward to get this done in a way that will bring savings to the Board of Ed and the town quickly. I'm glad to send around the financials. I don't think that you have them. If you'd like to take a look at it or other conversation, I'm sure I missed lots of things just jumping from one meeting to the next. So Dan or Joanne, if you want to fill in, please.
Okay, sure. Last year when we had negotiated with Davis Hill, their original PPA was 4.4 cents. And throughout our process, they were able to come down to 4 cents, which was considerably lower than pretty much any other PPA we were aware of in the market last year. So we contacted them. Actually, they reached out to us and asked us, where we stood with the other projects that we had ZRECs for. And we asked them to take a look at using South as the floor for pricing for South, and then developing a PPA pricing that took into account factors that have changed since last year, and there's been a few. So with East and Sacs and West, they don't point due south. So there is some variation in terms of the, energy that they can capture. And so they took some pricing decrements on that. East is the closest project to South. It came in at 4.5 cents. There's a few other things that have changed. The tax credit went from 30% to 26%, which is significant because it's year one to full depreciation for the developer. And then there's a few other decrements for the actual application of how they attach the panels to the building. So we vetted it out. We went back and forth with them several times. And as I said, East is 4.5 cents. West is 5.6 cents, and Sacs is 6 cents. The issue with Sacs is we will have to replace the roof that it's going to be attached to. It only has 5 to 6 years left on its useful life. So we'll talk about our plans for that a little later. But overall, we analyzed the pricing against what it would cost to build, because we asked for that pricing as well. And net, it's a net positive cash flow over 20 years going with a PPA. And as Brian said, over the life of the 20 years on a net present value, it's 1.5 million. In today's dollars, it's over 2. So it's a very attractive proposal. These are, medium-sized projects. They're not huge projects, but they will generate about $60,000 in additional savings in our budget, and that's what we budgeted for next year. And we do need the savings, so we want to move forward with it. Take any questions that we can.
So what's your timing doing in terms of what you need from the committee, if anything, and then the project itself going forward in terms of how we'll manage it, who would be in charge of that?
Yeah, just like last year, we managed it on the board side. Since last year, though, we did have an opening for an electrician, and we hired a gentleman who for several years now has installed solar projects. So he would be our manager, the person managing the project on the ground. We have that capacity internally. And then we learned a lot last year. Mark was helpful in a lot of ways in terms of teaching us how to get through the process of preparing all of the interconnection agreements that we need. So we're going to move forward on all of those things as soon as we have approval.
Which you need.
So last year we went to the Board of Selectmen for approval, and they handle the capital projects for the town. We wanted them to be completely, involved with this. And So we went through that process with the Board of Selectmen. Once they approved it, we entered into an agreement, the PPA, we negotiated that. So that PPA is ready to go, just with the minor changes for each individual school. And then the ordering can take place. They're going to actually, once we have a commitment to them, they're going to issue the purchase orders for the panels.
So they expect the commitment when, about?
As soon as we can get one, we're hoping to go to the next Selectmen's meeting, if possible. And once we do that, we think we can get most of the projects, Saks and West, installed this summer. East may go into the fall, depending on the roof project.
Okay, thank you.
George, you were talking in the beginning about, we started a conversation last fall about trying to coordinate the solar projects with the CHP. Especially since obviously the amount of electricity you're going to be generating with solar is going to modify your plans for the CHP. So since we have the funding for Saks, I guess that's the only one that applies to for now. But also the idea that perhaps, and maybe it's Davis Hill, but if we're looking at doing other projects, especially with affiliated parties like YMCA, with both with respect to CHP and solar, I just wondered if we perhaps might get more sharper pencils from Davis Hill and others if we put it out to bid again. The east roof bids have come in.
Yes, yeah, we've had the bids in since January, and we're ready to go. Greenwood again was the low bidder. They did the South School roof. They did a great job for us. We're very pleased with their work, and they've worked with All Electric in terms of the solar install. So between the two, and then there's also benefit of having the same developer servicing all 4 schools moving forward over the term of the contract.
Sure. So you had savings of $400,000 on the South School roof. I suppose, and you also looked at including the roof costs for Saks into a PPA and decided against that?
Yeah, it brought it up to 11 cents, the PPA from 6 cents. So it's 11.1, so it's 5.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And just looking at that over the 20 years, it was more expensive than doing it, on our own. The issue with the increase for just the roof is that they don't get the tax credit. They couldn't find a way to get the tax credit on it without, I guess, reframing the whole agreement. So we weren't interested in doing that. It's much cleaner this way. It's very transparent in terms of what we're paying for.
I guess the other issue is, and this sort of came up in prior projects, is when you have savings of that dimension, $400,000 on the South School roof, who decides how to reallocate capital dollars? George and Neil, do you have thoughts about that and the process?
I have some thoughts. I'm not sure that they would be widely shared by everyone. I'm at sea regarding where the town is, including the school system, on what we've done, what we still have to do, and what the cost benefit analysis is for projections for the things we want to do. And I just think that it's as if we're two separate actually communicating with each other. And I find it frustrating.
I guess I'd jump on that, just that, why is this committee seeing this just now for approval so quickly? Shouldn't we have had a discussion that we were close and here's the comments to make before, and then Mark comes representing both sides and juggles, and the 2 people, one in charge of each group, Board of Ed and town, weigh in, where did we miss unless I just missed those meetings, I don't think so though. Where did, the discussion and the give and take and the idea of maybe broadening the RFP and having a broader base, it might be more attractive to vendors, whatever. I feel that the same way George does. We sort of like missed a step there.
So on our end, though, we wouldn't bring it here before we have approval from the Board of Ed to bring it forward. So because there's also the Board of Ed needs to be up to speed on what we're doing and have their approval before bringing it to, to a Board of Selectmen and this committee.
But it can't come to this. It can't come to this committee this late. If you need approval that soon. If you don't need approval sooner, we can just go on. We're fine. But it sounds like you want a pretty quick decision.
Well, it's not, I have to say, it's not clear to me. It's, this is sort of the first time we've gone through this, that this committee actually has to approve it. I mean, we were bringing it really as an advisory matter to you. I mean, this is Kevin's committee for advice, to give advice to the Board of Selectmen. These agreements are in line with what we did last year very successfully. So, we can certainly talk about what we think is appropriate process. I think we have to be careful, to not, having taken projects through the town, we need to be careful not to, create a whole bunch more approvals than we need. But I mean, so this is sort of a test case, perhaps.
Penny, I agree with that. I think perhaps Brian and I will get together because I just want to make sure we're going to coordinate the CHP with the solar, and two, that we understand and agree. I think it's pretty clear that the decision to go with a PPA is something we would do. It's kind of unusual for towns to invest their own capital in solar. We may have been the first town in Connecticut to do that with the town buildings, but given the constraints on capital, I don't think we'd be proceeding with this on a capital basis instead. So I think the PPA, the fact that
just in terms of mapping out the process, would the Board of Ed feel better if, when Brian took the plan to them, he could say that the Infrastructure and Advisory Committee has already looked at it and they're in favor of it? Wouldn't that make the Board of Ed's decision process a little more easy?
Well, I don't want to speak for the board, but in my experience, it really goes through the resources committee of the board prior to going to the full board, and they would want to vet that out themselves as part of their, responsibility as well. So I don't think they would abdicate that need to do that vetting on their own to a different committee.
Okay, well then could this committee get a copy of the Board of Ed subcommittee analysis?
Actually, I just sent it to both of you as members of the Board of Finance. Whoops, sorry, I'm shrinking.
Brian,
I just sent that.
I think the financial analysis is something George and Neil could do better than most of us, and so I agree. I mean, I think I view this committee as one to be a coordinating committee and one that can spend more time looking at things than generally either the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen or the Town Council, for that matter, ever. In the past, we've gotten to a point where we bring something to the Town Council and they say, well, did you think of this? Did you think of that? Because it wasn't vetted enough. So I want to make sure that we vetted this. And then when it comes to, in this case, it need only go to the Selectmen because the building is owned by the town. So I don't think I have a particular problem with this. I just want to make sure we coordinate the CHP.
Absolutely.
But I do think it'd be helpful in terms of, I think it's pretty clear the financial analysis is going to be PPA versus capital, because I don't think we're going to want to spend capital on these projects given all the other demands for capital.
Okay, so what do you want us to do, Kevin?
I think it'd be useful for both George and Neil to look at the analysis that the Resource Committee looked at, capital versus PPA. I'm satisfied that once you do the work on a PPA, you don't reinvent the wheel. I am a little bit skeptical about the idea that perhaps if we went out to rebid, that Davis Hill might sharpen their pencil, because in this environment, if we have more projects to put before them, we might get better pricing. Now, I'm not sure it's going to be barn burning better pricing, but it might be better pricing. And again, the the timetable for this is the East School roof has to get going. And that'll be on the Board of Selectmen agenda for the next month, for next week from Tuesday, week from tomorrow. But the solar projects also need to be planned for. So if we can get it approved for next Tuesday, fine. If we have to do another 2-week meeting, wait for 2 weeks after that. But I think there's plenty of time to get these solar projects in the flow.
Good.
Right.
Just,
So
if I may, Kevin, just with regards to the 400,000 that we came under on the South project, Linda could probably speak to that, but we don't spend money out of a project that has not been authorized. So that would either go back to the town, or in this case, we may ask the town if we want to go ahead with the Saks project for the solar to reallocate 200,000 of that for that purpose. But it would have to go through all the approval processes in the town. We wouldn't just go and spend the money without that approval.
well, because that's bonded money, and the bond authorization for that was for a roof for South
Yeah.
School, unless it said any roof anywhere in
Yeah.
town.
So Linda would have to look at the resolution on that.
Right.
Right, we'd need approvals to make that transfer through the Board of Finance, right?
Right,
Okay,
and then
so
Joanne has explained it the way that it works. We've built these resolutions to provide some additional flexibility where you're not reauthorizing a new project, but the transfer would have to come to the Board of Finance before we can transfer the money in finance into the project, and before Joanne can spend it.
yeah, I see. Is Rich Townsend on? I see his microphone is off. Hey, Rich, are you on? I know in the past.
Yeah, Kevin, I am. I just couldn't get to my microphone here.
I know the town council in the past has been concerned that we perhaps appropriate money for one purpose and then it gets transferred for something else. And Rich or Penny, do you have thoughts about that?
Well, my thought is that has been a concern. I don't know if it's really happened, but given it has to go through the process again, I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, it has happened. So I'm not pointing fingers to anybody, but I think the town council is the one that raised the issue, and I don't want to be.
Go ahead, Penny.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the reason why the concern was raised is because that happened, and therefore it became, knowledgeable. And so I think that we've got to be aware of, how these funds are being allocated, reallocated. Yeah.
So that will go through the process. Mark is on, and why don't we take a few minutes to address the cogen projects that are anticipated. Now, the only one funded for, well, actually, we're in motion on the wastewater treatment plant for the town, because that's funded out of a major capital improvements project fund. And we're waiting for there's the gas company to hook up the wastewater treatment plant, so that project could move forward. Mark, you want to say something? You want to give us a brief summary and how we try to coordinate the solar usage versus?
Sure. Yeah. Well, just can you hear me? Okay. I'll just to take a step back for a minute and just talk about the success of the PPAs and the RFP process. So now that we've invested in a PPA that both Doug Lamont and the Board of Ed's attorney have approved, I think that's a good product. I think there are a few things that we can do to tweak that, including weather normalization language. And I do think we can capitalize some roof repairs into that if we get the offering to scale. But having a PPA that we want to append to the RFP, so it's not mutually exclusive. We can go ahead and use the PPA that has been blessed, so we don't have to reinvent that template. But we can go to the market again with that and attach that to the RFP. Benefit of the RFP process. Wilton, we had 3 schools. This was 2 years ago. So that's when it was a 30% tax credit environment, not 26. And the ZRECs were worth a little more. They've been stepping down. The ZRECs that were pledging to the investor in return for a lower power cost were about $125 a megawatt hour. The RECs we have for the schools, I think, Joanne, are they 99 or 100?
95.
95. So they're stepping down a little bit. But the PPAs that we had for Wilton, again, this was through an RFP, collective bidding, were at 2 cents. approximately 2 cents. When we went to bid a year ago this time, we released the RFP for South School. I mean, my advice was to have 4 schools in that, but we released that for 1 school and the pricing came back at 4 cents. So you could see that the more you have to offer, the more likely you are to attract competitive capital. We are just about, now most of the meat on the bone is coming from the Board of Ed buildings, but if we can get to a megawatt, it opens up interest from other parties, particularly Blackstone as the Onyx Capital Group, and they would look to underwrite and manage PPA solar investments as they did in Wilton, if we can get to a megawatt of offering. So we're very close to that. Joanne, you had mentioned that you had used South School as a floor on negotiating the pricing.
Yes.
Meaning that you didn't want them to respond if it was less than 4 cents?
No. What we said to them was, so the ZRECs haven't changed. The tax credit has decreased since last year. So we asked them, you know, knowing that South had the best opportunity to capture the energy, we wanted to work from that low point. Now, I'm not sure about what went on in Wilton. I do know when we vetted out the 4 cents PPA last year, it was considerably lower than anywhere that we could find, at least, you know, through your research and mine. So we felt that that was a good starting point. Now, knowing that we have East that is not due South and the other schools that aren't, we wanted to explore what the decrement would be for those systems that produce less. And so that's what they did the analysis on, and we'll send that out to everybody. They did a pretty comprehensive analysis of their pricing.
So do you have to, well, so in terms of facing south, that's an orientation of the panels, not the building, so that we can orient the panels, so with the azimuth and the tilt, so that they capture the southern sun regardless of, I mean, all of those roofs other than Westwell are flat, the areas that we'd be looking.
No.
Well, Saks is facing south.
It's just the pitch of everything. I mean, they looked at the shading, the pitch, not only the shading from the trees, but also the shading from the roof systems. So
Yeah,
for example, over at East, we have shading from roof systems themselves. So there was different factors that went into it, and, you know, happy to share the report that Davis Hill put together with you.
So the 4 cents we got last year is a terrific price, and for 2019, that was probably the lowest. The 2 cents we got in Wilton the year before was the lowest in the state at that time. But just to put it in perspective, so we achieved 4 cents on South School last year with just one offering, just one building in the RFP. So what I'm suggesting is that if you incorporated other buildings into the RFP, and half the work's already done because we have the PPA agreement, that instrument we can append and attach to the RFP. But if we added the other schools, if we added the roof of the gym extension at the YMCA, so that we could support through solar energy through PPA, the field lights, the Dunning field lights perhaps, or we look at the installation of a carport system in the Waveney parking lot area, where we also have medium ZRECs that could take off Lapham Community Center off the grid. We have the YMCA, which is one of Duquesne's stakeholder facilities, along with Waveney Care Center. So we very quickly get up to a megawatt. So I'm just suggesting that we could use that template, do an RFP, instead of having one building, get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 in that, with the idea that we would attract more capital. And it would also allow you to amortize costs more easily without tipping the scale on the tax code. If you wanted to capitalize repair, or basically what you would do is have them advance funds to the Board of Ed to pay for the Saks roof.
Right, we looked at all of those things, Mark. We did look at rolling in the roof into the PPA. And financially, it does not make sense to do that based on our analysis. So,
do you have to do an RFP? So you have to do an RFP Do you have to do an RFP for the East School roof? Did you have to do an RFP for the replacement of Saks roof to get that pricing?
We would do, if we go out and do it ourselves, yes, we would issue an RFP. We'd issue a bid.
Right, so you go to market for, you
The
went
roof,
just
yeah.
negotiated, but you would go, like you did when you went from South School to East School, you went back to, you had an RFP to get new pricing
Right.
from competitive bidding. So that procurement path makes sense. The integration of a CHP system, we're applying the same meter. So you've got your solar generator and you've got your CHP generator. And they've got to be synchronized both from an operational perspective so that they're not competing or canceling each other out. They're basically two generators feeding into the same electric meter, but also from an interconnection and utility approval process. We do need to be in sync and coordinate on that in terms of the total energy used and the two different generation profiles. For example, solar is net metered, but CHP, if installed less than or greater than 50 kW, is not net metered. So there would be a conflict in the utility approvals, basically trying to get two generators into the same meter. Although the elegance of the CHP is that it dispatches, you can run it when you need it on cloudy days and in the evening and the nighttime when the solar is not working. But that switchgear, probably a third of the cost of a CHP system, is the controls. And that could be capitalized perhaps into a PPA. And if we integrate CHP with solar, by the way, both can apply for RECs. Solar achieves a Class 1 renewable energy credit, which we pledge to the investor for a lower cost. And we can also achieve Class 3 RECs for CHP, which if we have a PPA, a third-party owner, we can pledge those credits and possibly get to the scale where a third party might want to own the CHP system. So you're not using your capital,
Right.
just like with solar.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, you know, we've talked about this at length, both you and I and Dan, about what you're discussing right now. And we completely agree that there's a lot of leverage in joining with the town and anyone else on the cogen piece. We have an opportunity right now with the solar, however, to install it with a contractor that we're very comfortable with and get the job done and save money immediately in our budget. So while we understand, you know, everything that you've just explained, we do feel that we have an opportunity right now at a very favorable PPA price to move forward with these three projects. And that's why we're bringing it forward. And so as we move forward, I think Kevin's question was, you know, we want to make sure we're coordinated on the cogen. We totally agree with that. I mean, you know, if a PPA makes sense with the cogen, then that's the way we should go. If it doesn't, then we should look at the capital option. The thing with the cogen that kind of made us pause last year is when the former consultant was presenting to us. I mean, that was a very expensive PPA. It was 12 cents. And, you know, there was a lot of moving parts with that in terms of the generation, perhaps excess generation that we'd have to pay for. So, you know, we feel like the solar is a very straightforward opportunity for us. And that's why we're bringing it forward to see if we can make it happen.
And I think we could, you know, with this, better is the enemy of good perhaps here, but I do think if you were to look for collective pricing for the town, if the town did want to roll in other facilities whereby you do have ZRECs for existing and or other stakeholder buildings, you'd need to do it with a more substantial offering, which would be the schools. Kind of what happened when we did an RFP for the town buildings, and we didn't have the schools in it. The pricing wasn't competitive for PPAs because there were a lot of little buildings. So the town, we looked at the numbers and determined the pricing was actually better to buy it and own it and have the ZRECs go to the town than pledge them and do a PPA. If we had integrated the town buildings into the RFP, perhaps even for South, this is, you know, backseat driving, you know, and looking back, I think the town might even have done a PPA because it would have helped bring the pricing down. But again, if you wanted to integrate more buildings into a public offering, now would be the time. I would just caution about the PPA agreements, that they are what's called a take or pay agreement. So if that solar system that would be prospectively owned by Davis Hill, if that's generating electricity, and for some reason the school doesn't need it, it's net metered. But if that CHP system is running to heat the building and is generating electricity, because we do need the heat, we'd still have to buy that solar energy, even if it was in conflict with the energy coming out of the CHP system. So again, back to those controls. So I would just caution that we look at the ultimate agreement, the PPA, that is a take or pay agreement. It's like leasing a car. Even if you don't need it that weekend, it's sitting in your garage, you have to pay for it. That there may be a need to look at the language in the PPA, so you're not breaching that agreement if you do in a year install CHP, which is another generator.
Mhm. So the thing with Saks, which is the cogeneration project that we have coming up, the solar project, as you are aware, is just providing a fraction of what the building pulls, requires. So that concern with that particular project, while you're
doing LED lighting at Saks as well.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're really trimming the load down. LED lighting, solar, CHP. You're moving off the grid, but so when you do the LED lighting and controls, probably that might be 30% of your electric load. So then the solar is a bigger piece of it, relatively.
Anybody have any questions? I'm satisfied we can Brian and I can get together and make sure that we're coordinating on these projects, so that, but Penny or George or Neil, do you have any questions?
No, I think we've established that we want to coordinate. That's the purpose of the committee. I think information gathering, I think that's happening. I mean, we're not approving, so that is, you don't need to know quite the detail. I guess it's fine.
Okay. Anyone else? Any questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to purchasing. And Brian, I'm not sure you want to stay on for this. This is, we're not really reviewing the Board of Ed's purchasing and procurement policy. We're reviewing the towns. So you need not, did I lose him?
Nope, I'm still here.
No.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll drop out. Thanks.
Okay, Brian, thanks very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, Brian.
Same with Joanne and Dan. Am I correct in that, Linda?
For the most part, yes. The Board of Ed has their own internal purchase policy, but for projects like these joint projects, like the capital projects and so forth, there's some crossover, but the Board of Ed does have their internal process that goes through their Board of Ed committees before purchases get approved.
Again, the objective here is to, on the town side, is to no longer have a guidance coming out of the finance department, is to have a policy that's been adopted by the Board of Selectmen. And I'm not sure we're going to be in a position to take this up next week, but maybe next month. So if we could just kind of run through, explain, Linda, what we have before us. Is this a revised document or a?
This is a combination of revisions and merging. On the town side, like you said, we had several guidelines relating to purchases that were not in one document. So what we put together in this draft, and I'm not going to go into the detail just to kind of talk about the process, but basically we wanted to further define and provide guidance by way of policy in how we go about it. And so this draft is out to the departments. They finished their reviews. They were finished their reviews on Fridays. I've gotten some feedback from about 60 to 70%. I have some that have come in this morning. My goal is to put all of those thoughts together and then recirculate a final draft, and maybe Kevin, you, I, and Tiger will kind of review this. I say Tiger because Tiger is the biggest buyer in town.
Biggest spender in town that I know.
We give him the most to do. And therefore, he's a big stakeholder, and his team, his staff have been very helpful in providing input. So we looked at sample purchase policies from within the state. We looked at some federal and state statutes, especially with contracts that we piggyback from the state on to get savings. And therefore, these are just some elements of the policy. We talk about general purchases, different types of purchases, professional services, and these services are typically like, you know, engineering fees and attorney fees and audit fees that are not your typical purchases. You don't necessarily go with the cheapest price. You also do extra reviews in terms of, you know, do they have a track record? You don't necessarily hire the cheapest lawyer, but you want to hire somebody who's good at what you need them to do. And therefore, the goal is for this policy to provide some guidance in how we go through those things. We have sold purchases. These would be items that nobody else provides, and therefore just to provide a process as to how we go through those and how do the various boards of selectmen, board of finance, and those individual reviews. We talk about thresholds for purchases and the approval levels, what guidance do departments have for purchases within various thresholds. We'll talk about bids. How do we do competitive bid? How do we get price quotations? How do we do sealed approvals, and so forth, and then some internal processes in how do we track all of these things in the financial system so that when it is time to audit, we do have good checks and balances. And then obviously now with e-procurement, we talk about the use of purchase cards, how we manage and control purchase cards, what can be bought on a purchase card, what can be not, and how do we reconcile those purchases at the end of the month. Kevin asked us also to look at online invoicing, and therefore a group of us met this Thursday with our financial system is through Tyler Technologies, and they have a purchasing module where vendors can provide invoicing to the town. The module looks nice. It's probably something that I think we would benefit from. We've asked them to give us a list of local government etiquette to use it. They provided that list to us on Friday. So part of our internal discussion is we're going to follow up with those users and learn from them what their experience has been with the module, how much volume do they track, what experience do their vendors have with this process, and then we will go from there, including getting price quotes and whatnot. The other thing that we also want to find out is also what other towns have done is identify our biggest vendors and talk to them and kind of see what their thoughts are on using this, because obviously it's a partnership. We would need them to be able to use this and basically understand from them what values do they see, are there anything that they'd like to recommend, and so forth. And there's Mike asking for a purchase policy. So that's that, just by way of review. So I'm not going to go into the content until it's actually been reviewed, but hopefully by the next meeting, I will share with you the entire document with feedback that we've received so far. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, but again, this is just a draft document at this time that's still being reviewed.
Linda, putting on a different hat this morning than just being a simple member of the committee, but instead representing some of the organizations where the town does the accounting, but the actual source of the funds come from the town. For example, CERT, and I believe the food pantry, there may be a variety of others that where the funding actually comes from their own fundraising activities, but the funds are managed within the town of New Canaan by your offices. I'd be happy to review the document from that perspective if you want to share it with me. I don't know if it's necessarily germane or not.
No, absolutely. If you would like, I can send you the draft that's circulating.
Hey, Linda, has this draft not been circulated to the committee?
No, not to the committee, not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, it's hard to have a discussion if they haven't seen it.
No, I was just giving an update on. I thought I was just giving an update on the process.
I'm
But
sorry.
I did get them.
I'm sorry. I think I expected we were going to discuss this. So it looks like we're going to have a discussion on this next month because you folks have to have a chance to read it.
Correct.
It's a good idea.
Although, tell me, is the purchasing code of ethics here something that's in the existing policy?
Yes, there is a purchasing code of ethics that currently exists, but I'm not sure if that code of ethics. I have to review if that particular code of ethics has been adopted. But I know that in the current code of ethics that went through, there was an element that spoke to purchasing, but I don't believe it was as detailed as what we have. But we've always had a purchasing code of ethics in the finance purchasing guidelines. It speaks to nepotism and those types of things. But I don't know if it was ever formally adopted.
Okay, that's where given the current environment where everybody's trying to do a lot of other things, I think we're not going to be able to have the discussion that I anticipated having today. So I would propose we put this on the agenda for next month, and this document be circulated for review by the committee members.
Yep.
Sure. I just had one question. You had talked, is that all right, Kevin?
I'm sorry?
One question about it before next month.
Sure.
Can I ask? So Linda, you might have said it, I missed it. In terms of the approach you've taken to professional services and all the town projects that I've done, I've found that particularly, when you're starting out a building project or something, you don't always want to go to bid, out to bid for professional services. And that hasn't been required. I just wanted to make certain that that idea was being kept. I mean, obviously, when we did the architecture services, we went out to bid on that because it was a big contract. But for some of the seed things, you have standing relationships, that end up being most efficient for the town. So I just wanted to is that what you said? Is that the approach you said that you were taking?
Yes, it did. I said that for professional services, it's not something that you typically bid, and I gave the reference example of attorneys or audit or things that you're saying that you would not necessarily bid.
Penny, it's interesting you raised that because as I recall, when we went through the audit for the high school by the state, it came as a surprise and a revelation to me that the fact that we had an owner's rep, which I think was over $1 million, wasn't it, Tiger and Bill? That the state excluded reimbursement because we had not gone out to bid with the owner's rep contract.
Which
so we
that's
couldn't
on
get
the high school building committee project?
high school building committee, yeah. So if you don't follow state standards, you can't get reimbursed by the state.
Right. I didn't remember that part. But, yeah, I think you ought to be careful on it. But I know that.
Right.
I mean, we certainly on that project went out to bid on all the architectural services
but not the owner's rep.
Yeah, with Joe Gambino.
Right.
He was worth his weight in gold, though. He did save us a lot of money.
Yeah, but the state wanted $3 million back, and we weren't too happy with that. So
I don't think.
And
we
I think
go
with those projects,
why we ended up with where we were on that audit.
And I think with projects that are grant funded, obviously the grants have their requirements, and therefore when you enter into an agreement with them, if it specifically says you shall or you need to do this, then obviously we would have to meet the requirements of reimbursement. And so if that was stated prior, then it probably was something that we need to do.
maybe that's something we ought to add to this add to this policy because if you're required to follow federal or state guidelines in order to get reimbursed, you want to make sure that's your policy.
Yes, and I do, there is a section in here that refers to contracts and how we manage contracts in relation to the policy. So yes, you're absolutely right, Kevin.
Anyway, so this will make the meeting shorter today because we're not really ready to talk about this, but we will have this on the agenda for next month and we'll get it out in advance of the meeting. And this is a draft, and Michael Dinan has already asked for a copy of it. So I think our policy on drafts is we don't release them until we get to a point where we're presenting it as a recommended document. But anyway, we'll talk to Michael about that.
And I do think it makes sense that Tiger gets a look at the rough draft before it goes to the committee, just to make sure that there's nothing in there that he thinks would to manage. I think actually having Tiger review it first is a good idea.
Yes, again, we're not operating quite according to normal schedule with what's going on around us. So we will take more time. There's no need to rush this. We'll take it up in May. So with that, we'll go to the Tiger's update of the capital budget fiscal year 21 and discussion of the Waveney House project in particular.
Okay, you want to start on Waveney first, Kevin, or what do you?
Well, why don't you give an overview of where we came out with the capital budget, and we can make some comments about the Board of Finance's thoughts here on reviewing what's in the pipeline for the rest of the year as well as early next year. And then we can also, in particular, given the fact that the town council is concerned about the Waveney House project, I'd like to have a more detailed discussion about that.
Okay, well, as far as the fiscal 21, the initial read on all of our projects, we did pretty good as far as through the Board of Finance and the Town Council, as far as what our ask was and what our receive was. We have done a preliminary analysis on what we can look to defer, both in the fiscal 20 and the fiscal 21 projects, to see what could be deferred for 100 days. We were asked to possibly go back and see what could be canceled. We haven't done that analysis yet. I'm working with the staff this week. We have to go back to Linda by Wednesday, I believe, was our deadline to give him back that type of analysis on what might be able to be deferred completely for the year. We haven't done that yet. So we were able to target a number of projects that could be delayed by 100 days and not necessarily affect project timeline or output, and then others that needed to go now, either were in the pipeline or it was best for us to continue to work on them now.
These are all tax supported capital items.
Yes, yeah, we did look at the bonded ones as well, but they fall underneath a little bit of a different circumstance. One, we have to go get the bonding authorization already, so we haven't done that yet. That's forthcoming, I think, next month. And then those have their own timelines associated with it. The paving one in specifics, we have money for this year, and the paving one that's in the budget this year is actually it's considered fiscal 21, but it's calendar year 21 project. So it actually bridges the gap between 21 and 22. So it starts in April and ends in December. We need the money in February, March to be able to go to bid and start contracts, but we won't need it until then. So even though it's sitting in our budget right now, we won't need that money for 10 months from now, let's say. So there's quite a bit of a delay on that $2.5 million or 2.438 or whatever you want to call it.
You might mention last Tuesday the Board of Selectmen approved the paving contract for this year. And we asked the question, should we perhaps go out to rebid because the bids had just come back, and given the fact that the world has changed a bit and people are perhaps hungrier. But Tiger, why don't you explain your view?
Sure. We had delayed it. We had gone out and then we had put an extension on it for them because of the crisis. They were shifting their personnel, their engineering staff to home staffing and things of that nature. And then they were having, they wanted to see, excuse me, revised numbers from their material suppliers. But overall, the numbers came in. We talked to them and asked them exactly how hungry they were, how many projects were actually out in the pipeline. There were very few projects in the pipeline from of this sort, of this size, from other municipalities. The comment was made that Norwalk was only working on projects that they had already approved last year and were going forward with that. Anything else had been on hold. So the contractors themselves were quite hungry to get started for the year. Between the three bidders, I think it was 3.02% spread between the three bidders and 0.8% between the second and third. So they were very, very tight in that regard. And then the question was, what do we do with the fact that oil prices are going downward or are down? Our clause in our contract has a what's called an asphalt adjustment clause, meaning that at the time of bid, the asphalt prices are set by Poten and Partners. There's actually a website that sets the asphalt pricing. And then as the project rolls, if the pricing increases or the pricing decreases, there is a subsequent savings or a subsequent cost, so that you don't have the contractor betting on what's going to happen with oil prices in the future. His number is set by this, and then there's an actual calculation stated through the DOT as to how to calculate the adjustment, either a credit to the municipality or an additional cost back out to the contractor, depending upon how asphalt prices go. And the fact that asphalt actually only makes up 3 to 8% of the overall content of the material of the asphalt itself. So the petroleum product is only 3 to 8%. It actually ranges around 4 to 4.3%, to be honest.
Interesting.
So that there isn't, the majority of the material, 96% of it is actually stone and aggregate and sand, things of that nature. So those prices are completely not part of the petroleum discussion. So we felt it was best to go forward, and also given the fact that some of the contractors were holding their prices from 2017, that they continue to work and still stay at work, even though they've had labor increases, material cost increases, and the cost of carrying the capital outlay for their equipment, the majority of which are in the millions of dollars for some of this type of specialized equipment that they're using. Say hot in place asphalt recycling, that train that you guys seen going up and down the road, that's at least $1 million, if not $2 million worth of equipment sitting there in that one train. So those guys are actually paying for that capital as they're going, but they're willing to hold their prices. Exact same thing with a micro-thin overlay. That train of equipment is in the millions of dollars as well, all specialized, not anything that you actually kind of buy off the shelf. It's things that are specifically made for the company to their specifications. So it's like a fire truck, so to speak. So that kind of rolls in exactly what we did. And I feel quite confident that we got the best bang for our buck, and we were able to stay current with our program, meaning that we were able to do exactly what we should be doing to the roads that we're working on at present. We were able to do it this year. So it's actually a very large secondary benefit to the whole thing, is to actually stay current with our program. And given the fact that we're almost through it. So I think it's important to stay with the program, because there's a person out there who has for 18 years or so been paying and not received the benefit yet up on their road. They've received benefits on the majority of other town roads, but on their specific road that they live on, they might not have gotten a benefit for it yet. So I think it's important to stay with the program so that everyone benefits on their specific street. Kevin, you want anything further, or?
Any questions?
Well, I think, there's no driving force of liquidity need here, or crisis, which I think, Tiger, these things are kind of geared to, like to make sure that we had more of a margin of safety, So even the driving force, we're not talking about a lot of dollars here, right?
Overall, it was about $2.1 million. The all all bonded except for $100,000.
Okay. So that sort of seems like a comfortable number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was inside of what our allotment was for the year, and then so we still have a little bit of a cushion for, say, another project to go out. We did hold all the parking lots, and we held the large sidewalk project. We're waiting for DOT approval on that, but we held all those and said that those were coming. And I asked the question, you know, what do you see on the future? And they were like, please put them out. Please put them out was basically.
Could you just explain a little bit cancel versus delay?
Cancel versus delay would be deferring for a year or more. I wouldn't cancel anything that we have if we don't.
Okay, that's what I was going to try to get to. That
No.
If it's there, it needs to be done. And
Right. There isn't anything in our capital that does
Right.
not need to be done. Cancel is a poor word. Sorry, it would be postponed for a year.
Yeah.
Put it
Okay.
into next year's capital.
Yep.
I apologize.
No, it's no problem.
Yeah, Neil, I asked Tiger and the others to go back and schedule. You know, Todd had asked that we look at what was could be deferred, and but we didn't get granular in terms of what we had planned to do in March. I'm sorry, April, May, and June.
Yeah.
So they're going to go back and look at what was planned to be done in each month and see if we actually things that weren't going to be done in June, whether we really need them or can perhaps cancel them. But there's only $700,000 in total.
Right.
Current fiscal year remaining, and that's a lot of money, but it's you know, most of those things were planned, and if we don't do them now, we're probably going to really need them by October, and it doesn't make sense to go through a reappropriation process for things that are going to be needed in the next 6 months.
Right. Exactly.
What's going to happen after July 1st is a whole nother story. We have the time by May and June to look more carefully at that.
Right.
So we will do that. And Tiger, you want to jump into Waveney House?
Sure. Waveney. I'm sorry.
As you recall, we had what's her name?
Lee Cromwell.
Lee Cromwell present to you last meeting or the meeting before, and people aren't very happy about the fact that the project is more costly. But anyway, Tiger going to explain where we are and what our options are here.
Well, currently the bids are due back on the 16th, so this week. We will, since they come in, they're going to come in package format. We'll wait one day and then open them on Friday. And then at that point in time, we'll have to vet them and see exactly what the numbers state. But overall, each contractor, it seems very committed to the project, and so we have 3 very good contractors committed to bidding and giving us a good number. So we'll see exactly what happens on this on the 16th, 17th as far as numbers. Our original excuse me thought on the schedule was basically the elevator and the bathrooms almost run concurrently. The elevator has an 8-month lead time on it as far as design and approval of shop drawings and things of that nature before it can actually be installed. So during that time, it was thought that the contractor would be working on the bathrooms on the 2nd floor in order to get those compliant, and then installing the elevator when it came due. And then in the summer of 21, we would look to do the additional work on the exterior, the western ramp, the loge area, and then the fire escape, the additional work that's necessary on the fire escape now. But the thought is that timing or work might necessarily be able to be a little fluid, whereby we might be able to put off the loge work and the fire escape specifically into the summer of 22 instead of 21 to try to soften the blow on the overall capital and the feeling that the fact that the numbers are a little bit higher than originally anticipated, to try to soften that and ease the curve somewhat. We do feel we should get the western entrance done, because then that kind of finishes everything to get you in the house, get you upstairs and be able to go to the bathroom, what have you. The work on the loge and the fire escape, we'd have to ask permission from the fire department, the fire marshal specifically, to delay that slightly. And then the work on the loge is to get the outside area working. We might be able to do some intermittent things to be able to allow people to access the exterior of the building at the back patio, say, instead of the full formal loge work, temporarily while we wait for that. That was the overall thought on timing. Again, we'll wait for the contractor to come in and then see. He might have some ideas as to what would necessarily work better from a cost-benefit analysis. And we can do some value engineering with him and see what might work if we accelerate it or if we delay it, and what would be better for them and for us. We're very aware of the fact that Waveney is still a venue, and we'd like to continue to open it as a venue once this crisis passes. But if it's felt that we should do it all in one shot and then save some substantial money, we might look at that. And if it's the other way around, whereby we can open up for a season and then do additional work and gain some revenue, we might want to look at that as well. But
so Tiger, could you just give me a
Sure.
good idea how that might fall time-wise? I know you can't pick the dates when you get back information and make your own, but when is there substantially done? Is there, or deadlines, or is it just us, whatever we say?
when is it? Well, we'd like to get started sooner rather than later. Delaying it just keeps pushing it off. That's one. And two, the feeling was that we could necessarily, if we get in and start working now, we might be able to, by the summer of 21, be open as a venue and not hinder that.
Okay.
But again, it's really circumspect right now until see the numbers come in on Thursday and Friday. At that point in time, then we'll know. We're hoping that's going to be a good number for us, but we don't know until that time. Might be a completely different discussion on Thursday.
Yeah.
Hoping not. It's a good one, but.
So the next delivering point is when you expect some kind of a meaningful information is?
It would be, well, we'd need a week or so to look at it and then, vet it out internally, and then we sit down with the contractor and go from there. So as far as coming back to the committee, we could have something within about 2-3 weeks. I wouldn't want to push off approval of the contract much past May. We still need that secondary allotment as far as an authorization, not necessarily issuance of bonds, but we need an authorization to actually award the contract because we don't have enough money right now. But so we would still need that May timeframe, I think, before it goes before the council and the Board of Finance for approval.
Yeah.
I think we all kind of coincide as far as where we would be numbers wise, possible schedule wise, and approval of the monies and the contract all in that mid-May timeframe.
Our next meeting is May 11th, and then the Board of Finance meets on the 12th, and the Town Council meets on the 13th.
Okay,
Right.
so
I don't think it gets any better than that.
no,
Yeah.
that's.
No, I'm sorry. The Town Council meets on the 20th. No. What's the public hearing for it? On the 20th. But anyway, I think we can actually take this up again in May on the 11th, and then bring it
Absolutely.
to because I think
Things change.
we've got to make some decisions about this project, because if we have no project, we probably don't have a Waveney House.
Okay, it's Penny. Can I enter here now?
Yeah.
I just switched my iPad because I'm having a bad connection on my computer. There's a lot of concern and conversation at the council level on how are we going to be using Waveney House, and we're not going to approve any funding for ADA compliance until we know how the building's going to be used. That's the sentiment of a group of people who are being rather vocal about this. And so I don't know where we stand on really coming to some kind of conclusion of, that concern. I mean, they don't, they're not seeing, if we're going to be cutting projects, why are we doing something for a building that is not generating the level of revenue that a lot of people think it should be? So Kevin, you and I have chatted about this, and it's the concern that exists at the council level.
Yeah, I think if somebody asks you, it's not a crazy idea. I mean, if somebody asks you, what's the point of Waveney? What is the purpose of Waveney? What functions? What is it meant to serve? What functions?
Right.
It's a pretty tough question to answer, no?
Yeah.
When we did the town survey, Waveney, and we've done surveys before, people love Waveney and New Canaan. It's one of the gems. And that building is not ADA compliant. And that's been a problem and a risk for years. So, I mean, I to sort of bring up these concerns after they've already been thought through and the project's been brought forward again. I mean, it's up to the town council, but, I think that this is, I'm not sure why they're bringing it up now. This has been.
It's not late breaking. It's not late breaking. It's been in conversation at the council level for a long time. How are we going to be using the building?
Well, no, how you're using the building is good, but to hold up making it ADA compliant as to how you can use a building just sort of seems to me, having watched it, maybe not as much detail as I've watched the Board of Ed projects, a little bit late at this stage. I mean, I think we want to get that building. We've made it watertight. We made that investment in the building. That was a huge investment. And this one is making it ADA compliant, which is something that we've been advised as a town to do for a long time. So I would, would only want to put this project off for really good reason. I mean, every time somebody has to go up to the second floor and they can't get there, that's a risk.
Like a collapsing world economy, that might do it.
Well, that might do it. I mean, yeah, collapsing world economy, but stock market's held up well lately. So I agree. But I don't think we need to debate if that's the reason, let's make that the reason, not bringing in extraneous factors about.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Right.
I think well, two things. One is the project's about to come to us for approval. So therefore there would be more conversation about it, even though the conversation has been ongoing for a long time. And secondly, because of the consideration of lots of projects and what we are or not going to be putting off, or we are or aren't going to be funding, brings it to the today kind of conversation. And so it's not late breaking. It's been ongoing and exacerbated by the world economy. So if we're going to be putting off stuff, everybody said, why don't we put this off as well? I mean, we're not going to put off the East School roof because that's really critical to do. But if we're, look at the other things that are on our plate. Do you put off the library? Do you put off, some of the roads? I mean, everything's got to be on the table as we're having a very serious discussion about the town's economics.
My view has been, continues to be that people enjoy Waveney. It serves the town in a lot of ways. It's a wedding venue, which to me, if we decided not to do weddings at all and didn't have that revenue stream, would we still want Waveney? And I think overall the town would answer yes. We know we cannot put the Board of Education on the second floor. We sort of know things we can't do. But we're sort of, if you gave the town the choice, do you want to tear the building down? Do you want to make it ADA compliant so it can be used only for the town, or do you want to try to make it a somewhat of a self-sustaining building with weddings and other activities that carry the cost of the building? Which choice the townspeople would make, I think, is they'd go with plan A or plan B, but I don't think anybody would vote to tear it down. So.
Okay, Kevin, as you know, I've been involved with this project how you use Waveney for many years now, and I am fully supportive of moving this project forward. I'm merely the messenger of the, sidebar conversations that have been going on at the council level, and so it's going to be incumbent upon me to move the council in a more supportive direction. But I think you can understand their concern as we are evaluating the impact of the economy, and it is so we're so unable to make that kind of evaluation because we just don't know what's before us. And so I think everybody's a little concerned about, approving millions of dollars for a project like this. But I can certainly, with this group's support of the funding going forward, I will do my level best to move the council in a more positive direction of approval.
So, as we said, we'll have the bids back. We'll have a conversation on the 11th.
Yeah.
Hopefully, this committee would conclude that they want to see this project, assuming the world looks better in May than it does now, but I think perhaps, hopefully, it will be.
Yeah. Good.
And I can understand to have a better economic potential for the facility, but the Waveney House, as iconic as it is, as the kind of go-to symbol for welcome to New Canaan, there is no sustainable economic plan to monetize Waveney House absent making it AD compliant. So
I get it. Right.
So really, you shutter the building or make it ADA compliant, and at the same time, or coincidentally, develop some kind of an economic exploitation plan for the
Got it.
there without making. It seems to me. I mean, I could be wrong.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
There are a couple others on the council who are just having a rather energetic conversation about this, shall I say?
George, let me put that to an extreme. Let's assume that we spend the money, we make it ADA compliant, and then go about looking at building a business plan that would make it economically feasible, but can't find one. Would you then go back and say, well, could have shuttered the building? Or in other words, at what point does one say, and I've been on the outside, on the fringe of this, so forgive me if somebody's already got a business model that says we can make this a viable income / cash flow solution for Waveney. If that's already exists, then I'm out of the loop. But if it doesn't exist, shouldn't we have some understanding that some realistic understanding that this could be achieved prior to spending any money on
it? Yeah, my view on that, Stu, and I acknowledge that makes an awful lot of sense, but it just seems to me that monetizing Waveney House would not be the hardest economic plan the town has ever seen. I mean, I think given its iconic status and given its just spectacular location, it would probably be a pretty easy thing to monetize if the building was more modern. But I acknowledge that you're right. I mean, maybe we should have more background and more modeling of what's the possible financials to see if it justifies spending the money. But then the alternative becomes just close the building.
Right.
Well, or I'm just brainstorming here again, George. I happen to love the building. I happen to think the town ought to own it. So that's my own personal view of it, but I'm just trying to take a very logical approach to it. The other alternative might be to say, all right, well, we'll find an independent third-party enterprise that will invest in ADA compliance and manage, operate the building to its own, profits. In other words, In other words, roll the business plan over to a third party and let them take the risk and manage from their perspective. Again, just a brainstorm, but.
Oh, that's a fair point, Stuart, because I think then the balance becomes, you know, if you have an independent operator trying to maximize profitability, the town may not have the value in terms of, you know, there's going to be weddings going on and you can't use the park for other reasons. And so we've really got to have a balancing here. We're talking about, you know, investing. And the real question is, what's to follow? I mean, do we have another stage of the KSQ report said, I think, $26 million, I think, right?
Yeah.
So, and
Right.
so there is another stage to come in the future for a heating system when the heating system ultimately fails. And so we really have to look at the whole picture. I mean, this is, we bit the bullet with the roof. The building is sealed now. You got to decide whether to keep the building open for anything with ADA compliance, and then we, you know, look forward and say what could we need to do in the next 10 years. So that's it. So let's have this discussion in May, because, you know, the Board of Finance and the Town Council are going to have to deal with bond resolutions in May and June if we're going to go forward, and we need a more thoughtful and educated discussion about this. The numbers will help us decide.
So Kevin, is there a way perhaps we could be sent, what are the costs of overhead currently? What are the capital plans for Waveney over the course of the next 10 years? And let's just see what a financial outlook might be. I mean, what kind of revenues do we need to generate from Waveney to make it self-sustaining?
We'll have that for May. You know, we've been historically doing about 60 weddings there a year that generates about $140,000, and obviously there's cost against that with the rec department, but we'll have that discussion in May.
Okay.
I actually, Bill, I was watching the reaction on Bill's face when we were talking about what are the expenditures down the pike, and he's kind of rolling his eyes. but those numbers are actually, I'm going to say, fairly easy to compile because we do have a KSQ report and identifying the various areas in Waveney that would need to be addressed from an operational standpoint as opposed to a beautification of the facility, shall I say. But then we also have the evaluation from the DUDE report, which is why, you know, Bill was rolling his eyes. But I think he
Is this meeting scheduled or is it 10 or 10:30? Hello?
Yeah.
I'd like to move on to a very quick update on Eversource. And if we were planning on adjourning at 10, it's 9:59. So, did we schedule this meeting until 10 or 10:30? Anybody know?
No, I don't know.
I think it was still 10, Kevin.
Why don't we, Tyler, just give a quick recap on Eversource and we'll move on.
At present, Eversource is on hold. The governor's declaration about what was considered to be essential business did not encompass, or in Eversource's view, did not encompass new services and new installations. They are moving forward with the portion of the project for resiliency. That's along Route 123 from Littlebrook, Lakeview, that intersection all the way into Norwalk. That project will start in the end of April and run through September, with two crews working on opposite ends of the project and then moving themselves forward and meeting in the middle. The DOT has a requirement that you can't be within 1 mile of each other on the same road, so they can't have two projects within 1 mile of each other. So at one point in time, they'll reduce from 2 crews down to 1. We are hoping that Eversource will relent on the new services requirement, because if nothing comes forward in this construction season for that, then we'll be looking at a delay of the project for a year. And we want to see if we can't get the new service to the wastewater plant so we can get that CHP unit up, which is due to be, bids are due back on this Thursday as well. extended that bid several times to give the contractors a little bit more time and room to give their best number forward. So we'd like to have that go forward as well, but we can't get the service in because they can't allow, they're not having staff work on that at present. That's kind of in a nutshell. We've asked them for their plans for 2020 several times. They've come back with limited information. We're going to sit back down with them again and ask for some more detailed information to try to see if we can't guide them into certain areas of town that seem to be expanding and want gas service. And then see what their plans might be for 2021 and 2022, given the fact that they haven't, they haven't been forthcoming so far. So we're hoping that they might help us plan for the future.
Yeah, I talked to Tom O'Day yesterday. We're going to try to talk to the general counsel to see what we can do to unlock the Eversource conundrum for us.
Their contractor's ready to go. They want to work.
I think
They're
part
working in
of
other
it may
areas.
be with the new installations that they don't want to go in people's homes for currently, but there's no reason why the business projects can't go forward. There's a lot of main to be put in downtown without going
Correct.
to people's homes. So I think with that, given our schedule, I would say thank you to everyone, and we'll adjourn. I have a motion to adjourn.
Just one question. The
Yeah.
next meeting date on the next meeting date is
The 11th of May
11th at 8:30.
at 8:30.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Stay well.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Yep.
you.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
What's on me? What's on me?